Well, pretty much every Wednesday for the past year, I have spent making political figure videos about people who are running in the 2024 election, doing all the research and the legwork on people's voting histories and platforms and summing it up in a nice few-minute video so you guys could make informed decisions at the polls. And you didn't. It's fine. I had nothing better to do anyway. It's cool. Anyway, after all of that, I've kind of gotten a little burnt out on American political figures, so I figured I'd do a foreign historical political figure. Somebody who has absolutely no relevance or parallels to current American political happening. And I thought, you know what, maybe Germany's favorite Fuhrer from the 40s would be a good fit for that. Absolutely nothing there that has any relevance or parallels to what's going on in the United States right now. I figured it'd be a nice break. Let's blitzkrieg our way through what's definitely totally not meant to be a cautionary tale about anything that's happening in America in 2024. It's just totally a random story about a historical political figure that has no bearing on the present. Little Adolf was born April 20th, 1889 in Austria as a little brown-haired, brown-eyed child. Definitely the perfect picture of German Aryan perfection. His dad was an abusive douchebag, his brother died of measles as a child, and Adolf became a problem child, often fighting with his father and his teachers. And he wanted to do the opposite of whatever his dad wanted him to do. So his dad's like, you should go to trade school. He's like, no, I want to be an artist. His dad's like, no, you're going to trade school. And you gotta wonder what a different world this would be today if his dad just let him paint pretty things. But his dad's like, no, painting is for wussies. You're gonna go to trade school. He's like, so fine, then I'm gonna go to trade school and do really, really badly. Finally, he was doing so bad in school that his mom let him drop out and go to art school, but then his dad died, and then his mom died, and then he didn't have any money, and he ended up homeless, and yeah, he didn't finish school. During this time of incel-fueled teenage angst, he started embracing German nationalist ideals. See, German nationalism is kind of like white nationalism or Christian nationalism, except there's no except, it's exactly like that. Anyway, as an orphan, he tried to get into the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna, and they rejected him twice because he sucked at art. See, despite trying to convince everybody that he was a really good artist, he sucked at it, and maybe he would have had a better chance if he tried casinos or stakes or airlines or universities. You know, things that are less hard to fail at. Well, in Vienna, he really started to go down all of the racist propaganda rabbit holes of the time. See, at the time, there was a lot of partisan propaganda publications putting out stories to really play on the cowardly Christians' fears, saying things like European Jews and Slavic immigrants were invading their country, and they were going to replace the good Christians and take all the jobs and commit crime and shit. And I know it's crazy to think about that in 2024 America, you know, the melting pot, the land of send us your hungry, your poor, your downtrodden. But at any point in history, people would publish that kind of hateful rhetoric, and then people would be dumb enough to fucking fall for it. Man, the education must have been pretty bad back then. Makes me so glad and thankful that I was born in America and I'm alive today in 2024. Where that's not a thing that happens anymore at all. Anyway, then World War I broke out. It was a big deal. A lot of countries fighting each other, like most of them in the world. And at this time, little Adolf was conscripted by the Austrian-Hungary army, but then they did a medical exam and they looked him over and they're like, nah, dude, you're not healthy enough to fight. Could have been bone spurs, who knows? But he wasn't gonna let a little thing like a minor health problem stop him from serving in a adjacent country. So then he goes next door to Bavaria and he's like, I want to join the Bavarian army, sir, please. And they're like, we're gonna need to see some paperwork to prove that you are Bavarian. So he gave him like a picture of himself taped to a piece of paper with I am Bavarian written in crayon, and they're like, yep, this checks out, here's a gun. I know that sounds like a totally made up story, but it's true, you know, minus the bench warmer's birth certificate. Probably, we don't actually know. We don't know how he got in to fight with the Bavarian army, but he did, and he served in World War I. He actually did the opposite of dodging the draft. He dodged dodging the draft. And that resulted in him getting some shrapnel in the leg, and then he recovered for a couple months, and he went back out there to fight again, and then he got some mustard gas in the face, and when he was recovering from that, Germany and the Axis powers lost the war. Anyway, as a result of this, he and the nut jobs like him started peddling these wild conspiracy theories, saying that they only lost because the immigrants and the Jews and the communists sabotaged them. It had nothing to do with they themselves just running a bad campaign, military campaign. Anyway, I just can't imagine making up conspiracies blaming immigrants and communists about why you lost. You know, it's just unfathomable in America in the 2020s. It's hard to picture something like that happening. Anyway, they signed the Treaty of Versailles and things got pretty bad for Germany. They were in economic shambles, pretty oppressed, and Adolf, who had no education or formal qualifications, decided to stay in the military. So now in Munich, his military assignment was to infiltrate and influence the DAP. The DAP was a far-right political party that centered around hating Jews and immigrants and communists and socialists, which is just crazy to me in 2024 that there could have been a political party based around those ideals. Anyway, instead of of doing his job to influence them, they influenced him, and he bought into the whole movement, hook, line, and sinker. Then to sound less like hateful assholes and encourage more people to join, they changed their name from the DAP to the National Socialist German Workers' Party. And I did not see that coming. Which is funny, because they were as much a socialist workers' party as the Democratic Republic of North Korea is a democratic republic. It's really funny because they put socialist in the title, but one of the party's stated goals was eliminating Marxism. God, could you imagine if there was a political party today that was obsessed with getting rid of Marxism? That'd be crazy. Anyways, discharged in 1920, he started working full-time for that party you cannot see. Gotta love jumping through community guideline hoops. Jumping through those is how I get most of my exercise, actually. Anyway, now that he's working for the party full-time, he just started doing all these rallies where he'd like just yell at thousands of people about how much we should hate immigrants and Jews and stuff. God, can you imagine somebody just going around the country yelling to big crowds about how bad minorities are today? It's just unfathomable. Anyway, then that party that you still cannot see was gonna merge with another party that would have made them more moderate, and this made Adolf really, really mad. And then he threw a temper tantrum. He's like, if you do this, I'm not gonna be part of the party anymore, and he quit. And they're like, well, all of our followers just love how he yells about how much they're allowed to hate immigrants now, and if we don't have him around, they're gonna leave us. So they asked him to come back. He's like, the only way I'm coming back is if you give me full control of the party and I get to make all the decisions. So they did that. I mean, and that's just insane, right? Could you imagine today if a political party just allowed a fringe lunatic to just take control of their entire party, and they're just like, yeah, they just let it happen? It'd be fucking nuts. Anyway, now he had total control over the party, and it was his message, and nobody could keep him on script. Hard to imagine something like that today, but it's true. Now remember, Germany was in some economic hardship at the time, so he gets up there and he starts just preaching economic populism. Like in the bad way, right? He's like, you can't afford milk and eggs because of the immigrants and the Jewish people. And there was a bunch of complete fucking morons who heard that, and they're like, yeah, you know, gas and eggs are kind of expensive, so fuck those guys. Because, you know, they were dumb and didn't understand how the economy worked. Thankfully, education's come a really long ways today, and we don't have to worry about those things anymore. Anyway, during this time, Adolf got a paramilitary group together called the SA, or the Stormtroopers, who just went around trying to intimidate and abuse political opponents and anybody that they didn't like. And now you had this deranged cult leader with a bunch of armed nut jobs doing his bidding. Then in 1923, they're like, we should overthrow the corrupt government, and they did a coup, or an insurrection, if you will. And, you know, I'm just thankful to live in a time in a country where something like that couldn't happen. He did get arrested for, you know, treason, but he wielded so much political power that he didn't really get into a lot of trouble. You know, they sent him to one of those, like, Martha Stewart prisons. He was allowed to correspond with people on the outside freely, and then he only served a fraction of his sentence, less than a year before the courts pardoned him. You know, basically just gave him immunity for his crimes. They were legitimately like, as long as you promise not to try to violently overthrow the government again and only seek political power democratically, we're all good here. Let bygones be bygones. I'm sure it was just a peaceful protest that got a little out of hand. And, you know, I'm having trouble believing this story because living here in America in 2024, it's just so hard to believe that there was a point in history where a man could have tried to overthrow the government and be criminally convicted for felonious actions trying to seize power. And they have a court system that would be like, yeah, it's okay, he can still run for office again. You know, it's just unbelievable in America in 2024. Anyway, it was during his time in prison that he wrote his little book called My Struggle, which, despite our president-elect quoting almost directly at his rallies, and his ex-wife claiming he kept a copy in his nightstand, he swears he's never read. Anyway, after he got out of prison, he starts rebuilding the party and having them run in elections to build party power within the government. They started picking up seats, he started releasing a bunch of propaganda and going around giving speeches about how they were going to make Germany great again. Then in 1932, he decides to run for president, and he flies all over the country giving rallies. In fact, he was one of the very first politicians to use planes to campaign. He even made his campaign slogan, "Little Mustache Man over Germany." And I'm sure that was just about the planes, and he totally didn't mean that he should rule over Germany. Stop twisting his words, that's not what he meant. Anyway, he didn't win the presidential election. Paul von Hindenburg did. Despite him not winning this election, it is ironically the election that would lead to Germany having the same fate as the blimp that carried Paul's namesake. After this election, Adolf's political power and allies were able to bully Hindenburg into appointing him as chancellor. And then when the German parliament building was set on fire, potentially by Adolf's own party, Adolf's party used the opportunity to draft legislation that would allow them to suspend people's rights and arrest political enemies, you know, for safety. Good thing nobody with political power today in America in 2024 wants to arrest their political enemies, because that'd be crazy in America. In 2024. Hitler continued with these sneaky legislative maneuvers and putting people in places that were loyal to him to give him more and more power. And then when Hindenburg died, he was able to abolish the office of the presidency altogether and merge the presidency's powers with his own as chancellor. After that, he used blackmail and some shady backroom dealings to consolidate his power over the military. And Germany now had a full-fledged Fuhrer, and the good Christian folks of Germany never had to worry about voting again those beautiful, beautiful Christians. At this point, he decided, you know, we really need to start working working on expanding into Eastern Europe and giving the German people room. And to do that, you know, we need to get rid of the people who already live there. And while we're preparing for this, we're gonna fuck over our allies. We're gonna stab our Chinese allies in the back who we've been friends with for a long time. And we're gonna become allies with their enemies who want to overrun them, this little empire called Japan. And they're like, yeah, you can definitely go take over China, this country that we've been friends with. I'm so glad that today in America in 2024, we value our allies more and aren't gonna throw them under the bus so authoritarian, bloodthirsty regimes can overrun them. I'm so glad that's not something that could happen. And then he made an agreement with Russia, and he's like, Russia, you can invade Poland and have half of Poland, and you can invade some of those other Eastern European countries. Just, you know, don't attack us. Crazy to me that somebody would willingly buddy up with authoritarian Russian leaders and allow them to invade Eastern European countries. I'm just so glad that that would never happen in America in 2024. So yeah, he, you know, started his little war and then burned across Europe, and then killed around 20 million, you know, undesirable civilians and prisoners of war. Did the whole concentration camp thing, the whole gas chamber thing, which, fun fact, they only did that because apparently shooting the people was taking too much of a mental and emotional toll on the German soldiers. In fact, it was Himmler, one of those generals that Trump said he wished he had. He apparently became physically ill after personally witnessing one of these mass executions and came up with the gas chamber thing to help ease his conscience. Then you know the rest of the story. He broke that pact with Russia, which was probably not the wisest move, and started a two-front war. And then America entered the war, fuck yeah. We took back Europe at Normandy, pushed all the way back, and then Hitler poisoned his dog, and pff, when he realized it was over, or so we've been told, I don't know, the Russians got the body. And then the UN was created, and we un-Nazified the world. And we learned a lot of valuable lessons from this story, and that's why nothing in it sounds like anything that's happening in America today in 2024. Because, you know, it'd be crazy if people were dumb enough to fall for all of that same exact stuff again in America in 2024. They'd have to be just so dumb.